You ever been in a place so dark that even your own shadow couldn't follow you? Where the silence is loud and the weight of life feels too heavy to carry? Yeah, I know what that place feels like. And if you've ever walked through that kind of night, then you, my friend, need to hear Psalm 27. Because this isn't just scripture, this is survival. This isn't just poetry, this is power. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Think about that. Light in the middle of darkness. Salvation. When everything around you screams defeat, you don't need to fear the storm. When the one who calms it lives inside of you. The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? You see, when God is your stronghold, you don't crumble. You don't fold under pressure. You rise. Because He's the foundation beneath your feet. You ever find yourself in a moment where everything around you feels like it's closing in, where nothing makes sense, and the silence feels louder than the noise? That's darkness. Not just the absence of light, but the absence of hope, of clarity, of peace. It's in those moments that Psalm 27 begins to speak with fire. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Just let that settle. The Lord is not just light. He is your light. Not borrowed, not distant, not temporary. Your light. That means even when you can't see what's ahead, He does. Even when the road is uncertain, His presence is the lamp at your feet and the light to your path. He doesn't just hand you a flashlight. He walks beside you, lighting every step, every moment, every breath. That's who He is. Fear thrives in darkness. It grows where truth is hidden, where lies echo louder than God's promises. Fear loves confusion, loves isolation, loves uncertainty. But when the Lord steps in with His light, fear has to flee. Fear can't stand in the presence of the Almighty. It can't speak when truth enters the room. Fear is loud when you're alone, but powerless when you remember who's standing next to you. You see, we get shaken because we forget the source of our light. We forget who we belong to. But when the Lord is your light, that means He reveals, He exposes what's false, and He guides what's real. Sometimes the world will try to convince you that darkness is stronger, that evil wins, that setbacks are final. But God's light breaks through all of it. It's not passive light. It's not dim or flickering. It's powerful. It's piercing. It's alive. The kind of light that reaches into the corners of your soul and tells you, you are not alone. The kind of light that says, this is not the end. The kind of light that carries authority, that says, peace, be still. And creation listens. That's the light that walks with you. That's the light that lives in you. When David wrote these words, he wasn't in a palace. He wasn't at peace. He was on the run. He had enemies chasing him, people plotting his downfall. He didn't say those words from a place of comfort. He said them in the middle of chaos. That's what makes it powerful. Anybody can claim peace when things are good, but it takes real faith to declare, "The Lord is my light," when everything around you is falling apart. That's not denial, that's devotion. That's not blindness, that's belief. And see, light isn't just something God brings. It's who He is. The Bible says, God is light. In Him there is no darkness at all. That means wherever God is, darkness cannot stay. That means when He enters your life, He brings truth. He brings purity. He brings power. Darkness loses its grip when light takes its place. You might still feel the storm, but you'll no longer fear it, because the light doesn't remove the storm. It helps you see through it. It reminds you of what's real, of what's eternal. Now, here's the part we miss sometimes. Light also reveals. It doesn't just comfort, it corrects. When God shines His light in your life, He shows you what needs to change, what needs to be released, what needs to be healed. It's not always easy, but it's necessary. Because God's goal isn't just to make you feel good. It's to make you free. And freedom comes through truth. Truth you can't see without the light. That's why David welcomed the light. He knew it meant safety, but also surrender. It meant protection, but also purification. And when fear shows up, and he will, you don't fight it with more fear. You don't drown it with distraction. You overcome it by remembering the light. You remind yourself, the Lord is my light and my salvation. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to stand in what you know. And what you know is, God doesn't fail. What you know is, He's never left you. What you know is, His light still shines. It's easy to get overwhelmed, to feel like darkness is winning. Just turn on the news, scroll your phone, look around. People are hurting, families are breaking, faith is fading. But even in all of that, the light is not gone. His light is not put out by the darkness around you. His light is not weakened by your mistakes, not dimmed by your doubts, not hidden by your struggle. If anything, your darkness becomes the perfect backdrop for His glory to shine. Light isn't scared of darkness. It was made to defeat it. And the darker it gets, the brighter He shines. Some people will try to dim your light because they can't handle the truth you carry. But you weren't made to blend in. You were born to shine. Not because of your own strength, but because of His Spirit in you. You carry the light of the living God. That's not religion. That's relationship. That's not performance. That's identity. You don't have to earn it. You just have to walk in it. And walking in the light means trusting when it's hard, praising when it hurts, standing when it's easier to run. When fear says, you can't make it, the light says, I've already gone before you. When fear says, you're not enough, the light says, I am. When fear says, this is the end, the light whispers, watch what I do next. See, the light doesn't always change your situation immediately, but it always changes your perspective. It gives you eyes to see what God is doing, even when your heart doesn't understand. It gives you strength to endure, to keep going, to keep believing. Sometimes you've got to speak it over yourself. Even when you don't feel it, even when the tears fall. The Lord is my light. Say it until it breaks the chains. Say it until it silences the fear. Say it until your soul remembers who it belongs to. You don't fight darkness with more darkness. You fight it with declaration, with light, with truth. And don't forget, light travels. Light spreads. When you let God's light shine through you, it touches others. Your testimony becomes someone else's hope. Your healing becomes someone else's reminder. That's why the enemy wants you to hide. That's why fear wants you silent. Because if you ever realize the light you carry, if you ever speak it, live it, share it, you become unstoppable. So when the night feels long and the way ahead feels uncertain, go back to the truth. Not your feelings, not your fear, not your circumstances. The truth. And the truth is, the Lord is your light. The truth is, He's already working. The truth is, He's already won. You wake up some days, and the weight of life hits you before your feet even touch the floor. The room might be lit, but your soul feels dim. Your mind feels heavy, and your heart is just trying to hold on. It's in those moments when darkness seems louder than truth that you need to remember this one thing. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? That isn't just a verse. That's a weapon, a declaration, a shield for your soul. When everything around you feels uncertain, when shadows start to grow in your thoughts, you need to remind yourself of who lights your path, who carries your soul, who fights your battles. The Lord is your light, not your job, not your talent, not your friends, not even your own understanding. He is the source, the fire, the flame that never burns out, the one who can pierce through any darkness. Darkness doesn't always look like pitch, black skies, or empty rooms. Sometimes darkness is disappointment. Sometimes it's betrayal. Sometimes it's fear dressed up like logic, anxiety parading as control. Sometimes it's that quiet voice that tells you you're not enough. That voice that whispers, you're stuck, you're done. This is how it ends. But when the Lord is your light, those voices lose their power. They might still speak, but they can't stay. Because light reveals, light heals, light silences every lie the enemy tries to plant in your spirit. You don't need to fear the darkness, because the light that surrounds you is greater than the darkness that's against you. There's something about walking through a valley with the confidence that light is guiding you. You may not see the full picture. You may not know the next turn. But you know who's leading. And when you know who's leading, fear doesn't have room to grow. Fear feeds on uncertainty. It grows in the unknown. But light makes the unknown known. It breaks confusion. It destroys panic. It removes the sting of uncertainty. God doesn't just show up with light. He is the light. He doesn't wait for your life to get organized. He doesn't wait for your past to get cleaned up. He steps right into your mess and says, "Let there be light." He shines into your chaos and brings clarity. He steps into your brokenness and starts building. Sometimes we wait for the feeling to change before we declare the truth. But faith doesn't work that way. Faith declares truth in the dark. Faith says, "The Lord is my light," while you're still surrounded by uncertainty. You don't wait for fear to leave before you claim your victory. You claim your victory in the face of fear. You speak light into the shadows. You plant truth where lies have been growing. You say, I will not be afraid. Not because you're strong, but because your God is. Not because the night isn't real, but because the light is more real. That's the kind of trust that shakes heaven. That's the kind of faith that makes demons tremble. Not because of who you are, but because of whose light you carry. You see, light isn't something you have to earn. It's something God gives. It's a gift, a covering, a promise. His light is with you when you're in the middle of success, and it's with you when you're on the floor crying. It doesn't flicker when you fail. It doesn't disappear when you doubt. It stays. It remains. It reaches into every part of your life. When others walk away, His light stays. When you can't find the words to pray, His light speaks. When your strength is gone, His light carries. You don't have to manufacture it. You don't have to fake it. You just have to receive it, trust it, walk in it. That's the kind of God we serve. A God who lights up even the darkest night. David knew something when he wrote those words. He wasn't writing from a place of comfort. He wasn't sitting in peace with everything going well. He was being chased, hunted, misunderstood, betrayed. But even in that space, he said, "The Lord is my light and my salvation." That's the kind of faith that knows light doesn't come from circumstance. It comes from relationship. It doesn't come from things going right. It comes from knowing who's by your side. And when the Lord is by your side, Fear becomes a shadow, not a stronghold. It becomes a passing moment, not a permanent residence. That's what light does. It gives you perspective. It gives you truth. It gives you vision. Fear tries to block your vision. It tries to convince you that the darkness around you is stronger than the light within you. But fear is a liar. Fear is a shadow, and shadows only exist because light is present. The very fact that you can feel fear means the light is near. Because without light, there would be no shadow at all. So next time fear rises, don't run. Don't retreat. Look for the light. Call on it. Stand in it. Speak it out. You say, "If God, you are my light, my guide, my salvation." Say it until your heart believes it. Say it until your mind aligns with it. Say it until your spirit stands again. There are people right now walking through real darkness, not because they lack faith, but because they're under attack. The enemy knows if he can keep you afraid, he can keep you from purpose. If he can keep you doubting, he can keep you from moving. That's why you need to remember, light is not just what God gives, it's what God is. When you walk with him, you walk in power, you walk in clarity, you walk in the ability to see beyond what's visible. The Lord gives you spiritual vision. He lets you see beyond your situation, beyond the report, beyond the failure. That's the power of the light. Revelation, discernment, clarity. Sometimes all you have is a whisper, a flicker, a single verse in the back of your mind, but that's enough. God doesn't need much to break through. He just needs faith. He just needs surrender. His light can shatter years of darkness in a moment. He can break chains that have bound you for decades. He can expose lies you've believed since childhood. That's what light does. It uncovers, it transforms, it rebuilds. Not with pressure, not with shame, but with love, with grace, with truth. And the enemy hates that light because he works in the dark. He deceives in the shadows. But once truth is revealed, his power is broken. That's why when you stand in the light, you become dangerous. When you walk in truth, you become unshakable. When you declare, "The Lord is my light," you remind hell that you are not alone. You remind fear that it does not rule. You remind yourself that no matter what comes, you've already been claimed by the King, who shines brighter than the sun. There are moments in life when it feels like everything is against you. People misunderstand you. Doors close without explanation. Situations rise up like waves, trying to knock you down again and again. And just when you think it's over, another challenge shows up at your doorstep. But in all of that, you must remember this truth. God's presence is greater than any enemy, not some enemies, not the visible ones only, not the ones you know how to fight, but for any enemy, seen or unseen, spiritual or physical, loud or silent, expected or unexpected, because his presence changes everything. His presence turns fear into faith, turns battles into testimonies, turns threats into platforms for glory. When the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord raises a standard against it. Not your strength, not your connections, not your resources, the Spirit of the Lord. And when God stands up for you, there is no enemy that can stand against you. The presence of God is not passive. It's not quiet. It's not distant. It's not soft when it comes to his children being attacked. His presence defends. It protects. It surrounds. It declares. It establishes who you are. Even when everything around you tries to strip you of your identity. You see, people may leave. People may switch up. People may betray. But God's presence doesn't walk away. When the fight gets intense, it doesn't abandon you. When the crowd turns their back, his presence is not conditional. It's not seasonal. It's not limited to church buildings or quiet moments. His presence is with you in the storm, in the courtroom, in the hospital room, in the confusion, in the heartbreak, in the warfare, in the places where your voice trembles and your hands feel weak, even there, especially there, God says, I am with you. Sometimes your enemies will be loud. They'll make themselves known. You'll see the betrayal, feel the tension, hear the threats. But other times, your enemies will hide. They'll smile in your face and wound you in private. They'll pretend to support, but hope for your fall. And in those moments, your heart may be tempted to fight in your own strength, to react in the flesh. But that's when you pause, breathe, and remember, God's presence is greater, not your cleverness, not your wisdom, not your retaliation, but his divine, holy, overwhelming presence. And that presence is not just around you. It goes before you. David knew what it meant to be surrounded by enemies, hunted by Saul, opposed by armies, betrayed by his own people. But he also knew what it meant to be surrounded by the presence of the Lord. And that made all the difference. Because when you carry God's presence, you walk with confidence, even in enemy territory. When you carry God's presence. But you don't panic when the enemy shows up, because you know who surrounds you. And you know that nothing formed against you shall prosper. Not because of you, but because of who is with you. There's a peace that comes from presence, not from the absence of conflict, not from a perfect life, but from the assurance that God is right there, fighting battles you don't even see, protecting you from dangers you didn't know were coming, making a way through obstacles you thought were immovable. And even when the weapons are formed, they will not prosper. Even when the lies are spoken, they will not stand. Even when the attack is launched, it will not succeed. Because God's presence is a shield. It is a fortress. It is fire surrounding your life. The enemy wants you to forget who walks with you. He wants you to focus on the storm instead of the Savior. To focus on the threat instead of the throne. To focus on what's against you rather than who's for you. But when you remember God's presence, fear shrinks, anxiety fades, and boldness rises, because the one who made the heavens and the earth is dwelling with you. You, not just visiting, not just checking in, but dwelling, abiding, covering you with his glory. Sometimes the battle isn't around you. It's within you. Thoughts that war against your peace. Lies that echo in your mind. Memories that rise up to paralyze your steps. But even there, in the mental battles, God's presence reigns. He brings peace to the mind. He speaks truth to the heart. He brings clarity where there was confusion, and strength where there was weakness. Your enemies don't always look like people. Sometimes they look like fear, insecurity, shame, doubt. But his presence conquers all of them. You were never meant to fight alone. You were never meant to carry the burden alone. The enemy wants isolation because he knows what happens when you forget the presence of God. He knows that when you think you're alone, you'll give up. You'll settle. You'll stop praying. Stop believing. Stop dreaming. But when you remember that God is with you, something shifts, not always on the outside first, but on the inside. And that internal shift is where victory starts. Because if the enemy can't steal your awareness of God's presence, he can't steal your peace, your joy, or your purpose. God doesn't promise a life without enemies. He promises his presence in the midst of enemies. He doesn't always remove the opposition. Sometimes he prepares a table right in front of them. He doesn't always silence the accuser. Sometimes he promotes you while they're still watching. Sometimes God blesses you in spite of them, not to show them who you are, but to remind you who he is, and to remind them who your God is. And when he does that, you don't need to clap back. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to prove your worth. You just need to stay close to the presence. Let his voice be louder than theirs. Let his hand lift you while others try to pull you down. The presence of God doesn't just protect. It empowers. It strengthens. It equips. It gives you strategy, wisdom, timing, and discernment. Because not every battle requires a sword. Some require silence. Some require prayer. Some require stillness. And when you're in God's presence, he shows you which battle requires what. He teaches your hands to war and your heart to rest. He gives you peace that makes no sense and joy that the world can't take. You're not outnumbered. You're outmatched in your favor. You've got angels assigned to your life. You've got a promise over your destiny. You've got the Spirit of the living God inside of you. So the next time the enemy tries to remind you of your past, remind him of who walks with you now. Remind him that God didn't bring you this far to leave you. Remind him that greater is He who is in you than he who is in the world. You may not feel strong. You may not feel ready. But the presence of God is not based on your feelings. It's based on His faithfulness. It doesn't come and go with your emotions. It stays. It covers. It keeps. And even when you can't trace God, you can trust Him. Even when the darkness grows, His presence shines brighter. And even when the pressure builds, His power sustains. So when the battle gets fierce, when the enemy gets loud, when the lies start pressing in, don't run. Don't fold. Don't retreat. Lift your eyes. Stand firm. Call on the name above every name. Because no matter how big the enemy seems, no matter how real the threat feels, the presence of your God is greater, stronger, higher, and closer than any force that rises up against you. Sometimes we live our lives searching for safety in all the wrong places, chasing protection in things that were never designed to hold us, depending on people, positions, platforms, and possessions to make us feel secure. But there comes a point where all of that falls short, where all of that fades. And it's in those moments when the ground beneath you feels unstable that you must remember God is your stronghold, not just your helper, not just your healer, not just your provider, but your stronghold, your fortress, your place of refuge, your shelter when the winds blow hard, your hiding place when the battle rages loud, your anchor when life tries to pull you away from peace. A stronghold isn't just a wall. It's a structure built to withstand attack. It's built to protect what's inside, no matter what's coming from the outside. And when God is your stronghold, you don't just survive the storm. You stand through it. You grow through it. You learn to rest even while the thunder rolls around you. You learn to worship even when the war is still going on. Because your safety is not in the absence of trouble. It's in the presence of the Almighty. You don't need to be afraid of what's out there when you know who's covering what's in here. Some people put their trust in systems, in savings, in strategies. But when life shakes all of that, what do you have left when the job goes away? When the friend turns away? When the plan falls apart? What are you standing on? What is holding you? David said, "Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then will I be confident." Now that kind of confidence doesn't come from the natural. That kind of peace doesn't come from self-help books or motivational quotes. That kind of peace comes from knowing your stronghold is the Lord Himself. the one who has never been defeated, the one who never fails, the one who doesn't break when everything else does. There's a difference between hiding in fear and hiding in God. Hiding in fear makes you shrink back, makes you stop moving, makes you question your worth. But hiding in God makes you stronger. It renews your strength. It sharpens your focus. It builds your faith. And it fills your soul with something this world can't touch. You can be in the middle of chaos and still be calm, because the stronghold of God is not shaken by the storms of man. Sometimes the enemy tries to convince you that because the storm came, you're not protected. But that's a lie. The storm came because you're protected. The enemy throws everything he has when he knows he can't touch what's inside the stronghold. But he wants to shake your confidence. He wants to make you believe that the shaking means God left you. But no, the shaking is what proves your foundation. The shaking is what reveals who's holding you. And when God is your stronghold, even when everything around you falls, you still remain, you still stand, you still rise. We all go through things that feel like war, mental battles, emotional breakdowns, spiritual attacks, relational struggles. But in every situation, there is a place you can run, not to escape, but to be empowered, not to avoid the fight, but to be prepared for it. And that place is the presence of God. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. It doesn't say they run to a theory or to a church program or to a ritual. It says they run to his name, and in that name is power, protection, identity, healing, and strength. You can walk through fire and not be burned, not because of who you are, but because of where you are. Hidden in the shadow of the Almighty, you can face rejection and not lose your value. Because your worth is not defined by man, it's protected by the one who formed you. And when you live in that awareness, when you build your life on that truth, fear loses its grip. Insecurity loses its power. Doubt loses its weight. Because you're not just surviving. You're rooted, grounded, covered, kept. There are days when life will try to push you to your limits, when pressure feels unbearable, when temptation comes knocking louder than usual, when the past tries to creep back in, and guilt tries to sit on your shoulders. But that's when you remember your stronghold is still standing. Your refuge hasn't moved. Your God hasn't changed. And in him, you're not just safe. You're unshakable. And you don't have to fix everything to rest in him. You don't have to have it all together to take shelter in him. He receives you as you are, and he strengthens you as you lean into him. Think about this. Every time you've been through a season you thought would break you, and you're still here, still breathing, still believing, still still growing. That's not your strength. That's your stronghold. That's God doing what only He can do. Preserving your life. Protecting your purpose. Shielding your soul from what should have taken you out. And if He did it before, He'll do it again. Because His character is consistent. His presence is permanent. And His promises do not return void. You don't have to be afraid of what's coming when you know who's already covering you. God doesn't wait for the attack to show up before He builds your defense. He is your defense. And He's already gone before you, already made a way, already drawn the boundary lines around your life. And nothing can cross that line without His permission. And if He allows it, then He's going to use it. And if He's going to use it, then it's not for your destruction. It's for your development. And in the stronghold of His presence, even the worst days become part of your testimony. Now, I'm not saying life won't hit you. I'm not saying there won't be moments when you feel weak. Moments when the pressure feels like too much. But I am saying this. You don't have to walk through it alone. You don't have to carry it alone. You don't have to fight it alone. You've got a refuge, a fortress, a mighty God who doesn't sleep, doesn't leave, doesn't lose, and doesn't lie. And if He says He's your stronghold, then He is. And no matter what tries to come against you, no matter what rises up to intimidate you, it has to bow to the one who holds you. When your heart feels overwhelmed, when your mind feels under attack, when your soul feels tired, you don't need to run to distractions. You don't need to numb the pain with temporary fixes. You need to run to the stronghold. Run to the one who sees every tear, who knows every fear, who hears every prayer, even the ones you can't speak out loud. And in that secret place, in that holy place, He restores you. He breathes life into you. He reminds you who you are. And He reminds you who is. It's not about pretending you're strong. It's about knowing where your strength comes from. Not about avoiding the battle, but knowing where to run during the battle. And when you're hidden in Him, when you're anchored in Him, no weapon formed against you can prosper. It might form. It might show its face. But it will not succeed because your life is not exposed. It's covered. Your mind is not vulnerable. It's guarded. Your heart is not left open to attack. It's secured by the one who calls you His own. There's a kind of desire deep in every human soul, a longing to be close to something real, something greater, something pure. And when David said, one thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. He wasn't just talking about a place. He was talking about a presence, about a closeness, about a connection that doesn't fade with time or shift with seasons. He was saying, above all else, above kingship, above victory, above prosperity, above applause, what I want is to be near my God. I want to sit in his house, walk in his ways, breathe in his peace, because in his presence, I am home. You see, this world offers 1,000 distractions, endless opportunities to chase after things that glitter but don't last. People spend their whole lives running after titles, after validation, after security, only to discover it doesn't satisfy the soul, because deep down, the soul doesn't crave attention. It craves alignment. It craves the presence of the one who created it. It longs to go back to the source. And David understood that. He understood that everything else could fall away. Everything else could be taken. But if he had God's presence, you had everything. When David said, oh, one thing, he was focused, he was locked in, he wasn't chasing 10 things. He wasn't divided by priorities. He narrowed his heart down to one pursuit: to dwell, to remain, to stay planted, to live in God's presence, not visit, not come and go, but to dwell. Because dwelling is about intimacy. It's about relationship. It's about surrender. And when you choose to dwell in the house of the Lord, you're choosing to make God your foundation, your direction, your atmosphere, your source of identity. Now let's be honest. There are so many things pulling for your attention, pulling for your energy. And if you're not intentional, you'll start dwelling in places that drain you instead of places that fill you. You'll dwell in fear, dwell in anger, dwell in doubt, dwell in regret, dwell in shame. But David said, I'm not dwelling in any of that. I'm dwelling in the house of the Lord. And when you dwell there, you see differently. You live differently. You move differently. Because you're connected to the heart of God. There's a kind of peace you get from being in his presence. The kind that doesn't make sense to the world. The kind that stays even when the storm keeps raging. The kind that guards your heart and mind when everything around you is shaking. And the enemy knows this. He knows if he can't steal your calling, he'll try to distract your focus, try to get you chasing 10 things instead of one, try to get you so busy that you stop sitting in the presence of God. But David shows us that our strength is not in striving. It's in seeking. There's power in seeking. Because seeking requires hunger. It requires humility. It requires sacrifice. And when you seek God, you don't walk away empty. You walk away changed. And David said, he didn't just want to visit the temple. He wanted to have gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. He wanted to see God, to experience him, to sit long enough to hear his voice, to sense his glory, to let his soul be washed by truth. And that takes time. That takes intentionality. That takes laying aside distractions and tuning your heart to heaven. It's not about perfect prayers or religious performance. It's about posture. It's about presence. It's about making space for God to dwell with you as you dwell with Him. And in that space, something happens, burdens lift, clarity comes, joy rises, fear flees. Because you're no longer reacting to the world. You're responding to His voice. And when you've been with God, really been with Him, it shows in how you speak, how you love, how you walk through the fire, how you stand through the storm. God isn't calling you to visit Him once a week. He's inviting you to dwell with Him daily, to make your heart a sanctuary, to turn your car into a temple, your room into a tabernacle, your every moment into worship. And when you live like that, you stop chasing everything else because you've already found the one thing that matters. And that one thing begins to shape everything else. Your choices, your relationships, your dreams, your reactions dwelling in His presence is not just about spiritual safety. It's about supernatural alignment. When you dwell with God, you don't just get protection, you get perspective. You begin to see beyond the surface. You begin to understand His ways. You begin to recognize His hand, even in places you thought were barren. Because your spirit is in tune. Your heart is anchored. And your life starts flowing from a different source. There's something sacred about being still in the presence of the Lord. Not rushing, not multitasking, not performing, but sitting, resting, waiting, and watching. And in that stillness, God reveals things. He brings things to the surface. He brings healing to places you didn't even know were wounded. He brings direction to places you felt lost. He brings answers to questions you've been too afraid to ask, because that's what intimacy does. It opens the door to revelation. You can't dwell in His presence and not be changed. You can't seek His face and remain the same. And that's what David longed for. Not just a religious experience, but a transformational encounter. And we've all been in places that were physically beautiful, but spiritually empty. But God's house, God's presence, it carries weight. It carries peace. It carries glory. And when you step into that, your spirit breathes, your soul aligns, your vision clears. To dwell means to let His presence define your atmosphere, to let His truth define your reality, to let His voice be the loudest one in the room. And in a world full of noise, full of opinions, full of confusion, there's nothing more powerful than sitting at the feet of Jesus and letting Him remind you who you are and whose you are. You may not have all the answers, but when you dwell with Him, you have the answer. And that changes everything. Sometimes we treat God's presence like a stop on the way to something else. But David reminds us, It is the destination. It is the source. It is the goal. It is the reward to dwell, to be close, to live out of that closeness every day, to carry His presence into every room you enter, every decision you make, every word you speak. And you don't have to be perfect to dwell. You just have to be willing, just have to be hungry, just have to say like David, this one thing I ask, not status, not applause, not things, just you. Lord, that kind of heart moves heaven. That kind of hunger draws His presence. That kind of surrender unlocks supernatural peace. Because when your desire is to dwell in the house of the Lord, you're no longer living for man's approval. You're no longer driven by fear. You're no longer shaken by storms. Because you've tasted something better. You've experienced something deeper. And once you've been in His presence, everything else loses its shine. And let me tell you, God doesn't just let you in. He welcomes you. He delights in you. He draws near to you. And He doesn't just visit. You become the temple. He makes His home in you. And when you dwell in Him, and He dwells in you, nothing can separate you. Nothing can shake you. Nothing can take what's been sealed in His presence. And when that becomes your reality, when that becomes your one thing, you'll realize you were never just meant to pass through His presence. You were made to live there. Sometimes in life, we find ourselves in the middle of the fight, surrounded by pressure, attacked by fear, overwhelmed by circumstances, and it feels like everything around us is working against us. People misunderstand us. Situations betray us. Even our own thoughts try to take us down. And in those moments, when the battle feels relentless, when the noise of conflict drowns out your peace, you need to know this. God will hide you. God will cover you. God will protect you in ways that no man can in the day of trouble. He will shelter you, not in plain sight, but in His pavilion, in the secret place where the enemy can't reach you, where the chaos can't destroy you, where the storm can't break you. This isn't just poetic language. This is a spiritual reality. When the enemy tries to corner you, when life tries to push you to the edge, God steps in and places you under the shadow of His wings. He hides you in a place where your spirit can rest, where your soul can recover, where your heart can be renewed. And sometimes the greatest miracle isn't that the storm stops. It's that you're preserved in the middle of it, untouched, unshaken. Because God didn't remove the storm. He removed you from the reach of the storm. There's a difference between isolation and divine concealment. Isolation is what the world does to you, but divine concealment is what God does for you. And when God hides you, He's not punishing you. He's protecting you. Sometimes He hides you to heal you. Sometimes He hides you to grow you. Sometimes He hides you to keep you from battles that weren't yours to fight in the first place. And while others may overlook you, while some may forget you, while the world may count you out, God has you hidden in the palm of His hand, wrapped in His presence, covered by His grace. You might not feel visible, but you are not vulnerable. You might not be celebrated, but you are still chosen. And God's hiding place is not a prison. It's a refuge. It's a training ground. It's a place where He prepares you, strengthens you, molds you, so that when it's time to step out again, you're not stepping out broken. You're stepping out bold. You're stepping out anointed. And you're stepping out in the fullness of who God made you to be. David said God would set him high upon a rock, not just hidden in the shadows, but lifted in a place of stability and perspective. And that's what God does when He protects you. He elevates you, not in arrogance, but in authority, not for the spotlight, but for spiritual positioning. Because the rock is Christ. And when your life is hidden in Him, when your identity is rooted in Him, when your security is found in Him, nothing can shake you. Nothing can move you. Nothing can pull you down. We spend so much time trying to fight battles in our own strength, trying to prove ourselves, trying to explain ourselves, trying to defend ourselves. But sometimes God just says, let me hide you. Let me deal with what you can't see. Let me silence what you can't control. Let me be your shield, your shelter, your defender. And when you let God cover you, you'll realize you don't have to fight for a place when He's already given you one. You don't have to strive for peace when He's already placed you in it. The hiding place of God is sacred. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's not for show. It's private. It's still. It's holy. And in that quiet place, God speaks to your soul. He reminds you that your value is not in what people say. It's not in what you achieve. It's in who you belong to. And when you're hidden in Him, you can rest, not because the world is at peace, but because your spirit is. You can sleep, not because the war is over, but because the one who watches over you never sleeps nor slumbers. There will be seasons where God hides you to protect your calling, to protect your heart, to protect your future. Because not everyone can handle what God is building in you. Not everyone can understand the process He's taking you through. And if He exposed you too early, it might destroy what He's developing in you. So He hides you, not to punish you, but to prepare you, not to reject you, but to refine you. And in that season, it's easy to feel forgotten, to feel abandoned. But let me remind you, hidden does not mean forsaken. Covered does not mean canceled. Out of sight does not mean out of purpose. Sometimes the hiding place feels lonely, but it's in that solitude where God becomes your everything, where his voice becomes clearer, where his presence becomes sweeter, where your roots grow deeper. And that's where strength is built, not on the stage, but in the secret, not in the crowd, but in the quiet. And when God sets you high upon that rock, it's because he knows you've been built to last. You've been forged in the fire, protected in the battle. And now it's time to stand. The protection of God doesn't always look like escape. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Sometimes it looks like being in the fire, but not being burned. Sometimes it looks like walking through the valley, but not being overcome. And it's in those moments that you realize his hiding place was not just a shelter. It was a strategy. It was part of the plan, part of the process. And every moment you thought you were being delayed, you were really being developed. Every moment you thought you were being overlooked, you were actually being overhauled. Every second you thought you were hidden from the world, you were being held by heaven. God is not hiding you because he's afraid of your weakness. He's hiding you because he's shaping your strength. He's preserving your purpose. He's positioning you for greater. And when the time is right, he will reveal what he has refined. He will elevate what he has established. He will release what he has restored. But until then, trust the hiding, embrace the covering, lean into the shelter, because even in the hiding, he's still working. Even in the covering, he's still moving. Even in the secret, he's still speaking. There's power in knowing that God sees what others miss, that he knows the battles you've faced in silence, the tears you've cried in private, the prayers you've whispered in the dark. And he doesn't just hear you. He responds, not always with noise, not always with signs, but with safety, with security, with the assurance that you're not exposed to the enemy. You're not left to the elements. You're hidden. You're protected. You're held in the hollow of his hand. And when the enemy comes, when the arrows fly, when the lies start circling, you can stand firm in the truth that God has hidden you in his tabernacle, in his dwelling, in his truth. And nothing can touch what he has covered. Nothing can undo what he has established. And no weapon formed against you will prosper. Not because of your power, but because of his presence. Not because of your plans, but because of his protection. You don't need to fear being hidden. You don't need to panic in the pause. You don't need to question the quiet, because in the day of trouble, in the season of battle, in the hour of darkness, God is still your refuge. God is still your hiding place. And there's nothing more powerful than being hidden in the one who holds all things together, who sees the end from the beginning, who shelters you not just from harm, but from distractions, from detours, from delays that don't align with your destiny. So, in the waiting, in the wondering, in the hiding, don't lose heart. Don't lose focus. Don't lose faith. Because the hiding place is not the end. It's the in between. It's the space between calling and commissioning, between pain and purpose, between battle and breakthrough. And what God begins in the secret, He will finish in the open. There is a power in worship that can't be fully explained by human words. It goes beyond music, beyond songs, beyond the movements of the body. It's a language of the soul, a declaration of faith, a connection to the divine that transcends circumstances. And when David says, I will offer sacrifices of joy in His tent, I will sing and make music to the Lord. He's not just talking about religious ritual. He's revealing a heart posture, a way of living that chooses joy and praise, even when the weight of the world feels heavy, even when the night is dark and the enemy seems close. Worship is a weapon. Worship is a shield. Worship is a force that shifts atmospheres, and it starts with a choice. A choice to lift your voice, to raise your hands, to open your heart to say, God, I may be hurting, I may be tired, I may be afraid, but I still believe, I still trust, I still honor you. And that declaration moves heaven. It stirs the spirit. It breaks chains that seem unbreakable. It releases peace that the world cannot give or take away. When you worship in the midst of the storm, you're not denying the storm. You're declaring that your God is bigger than the storm. You're telling the enemy that his plans cannot prevail. You're reminding your own heart that hope is not lost. And that kind of worship takes strength. It takes courage. It takes faith that refuses to be silent in the face of pain. And the moment you choose worship over worry, praise over panic, thanksgiving over tension, you begin to experience a shift inside you that nothing else can produce. Joy in worship is not about pretending everything is fine. It's about recognizing that even in brokenness, there is a reason to rejoice. Even in trials, there is a purpose for praise, because worship shifts your perspective from what is seen to what is unseen, from what is temporary to what is eternal. And when you focus on God's goodness, on His faithfulness, on His promises, your spirit is lifted above your problems, your heart is anchored in hope, and your soul is set free. David's choice to offer sacrifices of joy is a radical act of faith. Because sacrifice means giving up something valuable. And in worship, that sacrifice is often your pride, your pain, your doubt, your fear. And when you give those things to God, you make space for Him to fill you with His peace, His strength, His joy. And that joy is not dependent on circumstances. It's a fruit of the Spirit, a gift from God, a fire in the bones that can't be quenched by disappointment or defeat. Worship is not just for the mountaintop moments. It's for the valley moments too. And it's in the valley that worship becomes even more powerful, because it's easy to praise when everything is going your way. But it's worship in the dark places that reveals the depth of your faith, that forges character, that connects you to the heart of God in ways that success never can. And that's why David made music to the Lord, even when enemies surrounded him, even when fear threatened him, because he knew worship was his weapon and his refuge. There's a supernatural exchange that happens. When you worship, you give God your burdens, and he gives you his peace. You give him your worries, and he gives you strength. You give him your fears, and he gives you faith. And that exchange transforms your inner world. It changes the way you see your circumstances, and it empowers you to keep standing, keep believing, keep pressing forward. Because worship aligns your spirit with heaven's reality. Sometimes the enemy tries to steal your worship. He tries to steal your joy, your praise, your gratitude, because he knows those things weaken his grip on your life. But you have a choice. Will you let fear silence your song? Or will you raise your voice and sing louder? Will you let pain close your heart? Or will you open it wider to God's presence? Will you let disappointment drown your hope? Or will you offer sacrifices of joy even when it hurts? Worship is a declaration of trust. It's saying, God, I don't understand. I don't see the way. But I believe you are good. I believe you are with me. I believe your plans are for my good. And that trust opens the door for miracles, for breakthroughs, for healing, for restoration. Because God inhabits the praises of his people. And when you worship, you invite his presence to invade your situation, to bring light to your darkness, to break chains that have held you captive. There's something about singing praises that lifts the spirit, that lifts the atmosphere, that lifts the burden from your shoulders. And when you make music to the Lord, you're participating in an ancient, powerful tradition that connects you to generations of believers who have overcome by faith, by hope, by worship. And that legacy strengthens you, reminds you that you are not alone, that God is faithful through every generation, and that your worship joins a heavenly chorus that never stops. Worship also shifts your focus from self to Savior, from your problems to God's power, from your limitations to his limitless ability. And in that shift, you find freedom. Because when you fix your eyes on Jesus, when you fix your heart on his goodness, you are no longer defined by your circumstances, but by his promises. And that changes how you walk, how you talk, how you live. Because your life becomes a testimony of faith in action. Sometimes worship is silent. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it's tears. Sometimes it's laughter. But no matter how it looks, when it comes from a heart fully surrendered to God, it carries power. And David's choice to worship was a statement that nothing, no trial, no enemy, no fear, could keep him from praising the one who held his future, the one who fought his battles, the one who loved him unconditionally. Worship is not about perfection. It's about passion. It's not about performance. It's about presence. And when you come before God with a heart willing to praise, willing to trust, willing to surrender, you tap into a wellspring of strength that lifts you above the challenges, that reminds you of your identity as a child of God, that fills you with hope and courage to face whatever comes next. In worship, you find your voice again. You find your courage again. You find your joy again. And no matter what life throws at you, when you make music to the Lord, you are declaring that your hope is not in the storm, but in the one who controls the storm. Your peace is not in your circumstances, but in the one who holds your future. And your joy is not based on what happens to you, but on who God is. Faithful, loving, and strong. So choose worship, choose joy, choose praise, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it, because worship changes everything. Worship opens heaven. Worship brings light into darkness. And worship is the key that unlocks the door to God's presence, where miracles happen, where peace reigns, and where your soul finds rest. As we draw this journey to a close, let me remind you, life's battles, the darkness that surrounds us, the fears that try to steal our peace, they do not have the final say, because there is a light that shines brighter than any shadow. There is a strength that is greater than any weakness. There is a hope that never fades. And that light, that strength, that hope is found in God, the God who is our refuge, our rock, our hiding place, our deliverer. We have walked through the truth that God hides us in his shelter, protecting us when the enemy comes like a flood, that he lifts us high upon a rock, giving us a place of perspective and safety, that even in the valley, even in the darkest hour, he is with us, guiding us, strengthening us, surrounding us with his favor and love, and that in every storm, there is a secret place of peace waiting for us if we just reach out and trust him. We saw how faith keeps us anchored when the winds of doubt try to pull us away. How trust is not blind, but rooted in the character of God, who has never failed, who never forsakes, who never forgets his children. And how worship is a powerful weapon, a declaration of joy and faith that breaks chains, shifts atmospheres, and invites the very presence of God into our lives. No matter the circumstances we face, the journey through Psalm 27 reminds us that the battle may be fierce, But the warrior within us is greater because we don't fight alone. We don't walk this path by ourselves. God is with us every step, in the hidden place, in the secret shelter, in the high places where He sets us, and He calls us to stand strong, to be courageous, to lift our voices in praise, and to keep our eyes fixed on Him. There will be moments when the darkness feels overwhelming, when the enemy seems to surround us on every side, when fear tries to paralyze us, when doubt whispers lies into our hearts. But remember, those moments are not the end of your story. They are the opening chapters of a greater testimony, a story of God's faithfulness, a story of light breaking through the night, a story of victory that has already been won through the power of the one who calls us His own. Let this be your declaration today. No matter what you face, no matter how dark the night, no matter how fierce the battle, God is your light, your salvation, your stronghold, and in Him you have nothing to fear, because He will hide you in His shelter, protect you from harm, lift you high above the storms, and fill your heart with a joy that cannot be taken away. So rise up, stand firm, walk boldly in the truth that you are covered by the Almighty, chosen by the King, and destined for victory. Keep your faith alive. Keep your hope burning. Keep your worship flowing, because the darkness cannot overcome the light. The enemy cannot defeat the one who is hidden in the hand of God, and your story is far from over. It is just beginning. Remember, the Lord is your light and your salvation. Whom shall you fear? The Lord is the stronghold of your life. Of whom shall you be afraid? Let these words resonate deep in your spirit. Carry them with you as a shield, a sword, and a song. And let them remind you daily that when you seek God with all your heart, when you trust Him completely, when you praise Him relentlessly, you will find the strength to face any challenge, the courage to overcome any obstacle, and the peace that surpasses all understanding. And as you move forward, hold on to this promise. God's light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So no matter what shadows loom in your life, know that God's light is greater, is deeper. His love is deeper, and His power is stronger. And that light will guide you home. It will guide you to victory, and it will shine through you as a beacon of hope to others who are still walking through their own night. So today, choose to walk in the light of God's presence. Choose to live in the confidence of His protection. Choose to trust in the power of His promises, and choose to worship with a heart full of joy and gratitude. Because when you do, you will discover the secret place where fear loses its grip, where peace reigns supreme, where hope is restored, and where your soul finds its true rest. May this truth settle deep in your heart. May it strengthen your spirit And may it inspire you to live boldly, love fiercely, and shine brightly, knowing that you are hidden, protected, and loved by the Creator of all things, and that no matter what comes your way, you are never alone, you are never forsaken, and you are always held by the one who calls you his beloved. Let this be the foundation on which you build your life, a life of faith, a life of courage, a life of worship, and may the light of God guide your every step, illuminate your path, and lead you into the fullness of the abundant life He has prepared for you, now and forevermore. So I don't know what you're facing today, but I do know this. The Lord is your light. He's not just a flicker in the distance. He's a flame that burns in your soul. You don't have to fear. You don't have to run. You don't have to hide. Stand in the light, walk in the light, live in the light. Because with God, darkness never wins.